Alright everyone, we start off today talking about this blackout shit with Texas, and the story has completely jumped the shark at this point and gone from a weather event, which is what a big ice storm actually is, to really a political lightning rod, and it's being interpreted in a half dozen different ways by opportunists, and at first I wasn't even going to cover it, maybe mention it in a video because it was weather related as opposed to being politics and stuff, which is my normal forte, but then everyone under the sun decided that it should be an issue for, the midterms, I suppose, and for Texas politics. First and foremost, there will be a pinned comment, if you're watching this video on YouTube, with links to 4 other sites that I upload videos on at this point, because YouTube likes to algorithmically demote people. By the way, a thing... I think the algorithm becomes almost a cycle, because it seems like the algorithm in a perverse manner demotes your content, and then the algorithm determines that because your content's not doing as well, it should demote you further because you're less interesting. It seems to be a sort of a self-replicating algorithmic situation, but time will tell if they fix it. I don't think that the purpose is to ever do so. When the storm initially happened days ago, the news was, hey, the power's been knocked out to most of Texas. People are, freezing and having problems. It's turned into a shitfest, especially if you go to Twitter, which half of you probably don't use anymore. Not really worth using. It's turned into a festival of human stupidity. Nobody seems to be able to interpret it as it really is. Just to look at the event for what it is. A bunch of people are suffering because their power's out. Ta-da! That's it. By the way, here's the thing. When people are saying, well, it's the result of the energy grid. Texas, of course, has by and large its own grid. It's separate from the 2 other main grid systems in the United States. This can serve them well or ill, depending on the situation. And so they say, well, it's Texas's fault. It's too deregulated. That's the problem. That's why the power was knocked out. Other people are saying it's because Chinese components were used on the transmission stations. Neither of these are fully true, but there is an aspect of both. Texas's power grid is not weatherized to the same degree as power stations in New England, because there, this kind of freezing winter storm is not particularly common. I believe they actually have technology on a lot of the windmills and so forth further north that they self-warm. Part of the electricity that they're generating is used to keep them working in sub-zero temperatures. Texas doesn't typically have this particular kind of cold snap and ice storm. And by the way, an ice storm would have damaged, solar cells and windmills anyway, regardless. As far as the Chinese component story, Beijing Biden's executive order does lift temporarily the ban on importing those components. It hasn't been long enough for those to be in use in the Texas power grid. By the way, it's funny because the fact checkers, when that claim is made, oh, this is the result of Chinese components on the transmission stations, they keep rating it as false. It's technically half true, because his executive order, as claimed, does, at least temporarily, lift that limitation in order to allow them to study whether they should keep the ban in place. Well, you should. There's no particular reason why semi-hostile foreign entities should be in control of any aspect of the power grid. It's kind of an important feature of modern society. Your computer needs power. Increasingly, your cars need power. Everything needs electricity, so slightly important. By the way, I think that we should decentralize the power grid further. Instead of having China come in and build huge solar fields out in some semi-arid location, you should just mount them on existing structures on people's homes. Bring back more subsidies for people to do that. Make them a front-end subsidy so that it's just organically cheaper, instead of, oh, if you have 20 grand to invest now, we'll give you part of it back later. Why don't they just subsidize it directly? The whole middle class would go solar if they could. By the way, and Texas is blaming the existence of green energy. So, well, it's the problem of the windmills and solar cells. More by design than by existence. By the way, I do support the use of green energy. Yes, that is with the caveat that without higher efficiency, it still requires fossil fuel because you have to mine the components that make the panel, that make the windmill. Realized. The power trade-off is getting higher. I realize that there are heavy metals in them. There are electrical issues that need to be worked through. See, I believe that technology evolves over time. The same is true of fossil fuel. No problem with its use. I happen to believe that it's created deep in the earth by aerobic processes. I have a feeling that chemotrophic bacteria, when they poop, that poop eventually gets turned into hydrocarbons over time through porous rock. Just a theory I happen to believe in. But it's pathetic watching people. Most pathetic part is Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz is now a bigger story than the ice storm itself. Oh my God, he went to Cancun for a day. He abandoned the people of Texas to go be on the beach. Who cares? His job, the job of a senator, is represent the state entity in Congress in D.C. The governor is the one that has to deal with the domestic situation. Then everyone's trying to get photo ops and shit like that going down to Texas. Oh, I handed out water bottles. Oh, I raised $10. AOC's doing it. Ted Cruz is doing it. Fucking every political group in the country. And here's why. While Texas still leans red, as we saw in the last election, it is more of a potential swing state now. If the Democrats can pick off Texas, then they can win the next election probably quite easily, depending on how much they overstretch. We have to wait and see what happens at the midterms. The Republicans really want to maintain it. So anything that happens in a state like that, like this, if this were happening in Wyoming, you wouldn't see so many people with photo op gathering going on. You wouldn't see so many liberals going there to take selfies in front of a solar cell. Oh, well, this solar cell's still working. These people have power because they have a green roof. You wouldn't see that. If it were happening in a blue state, and the other thing, it's piss poor watching that so many people, seeing that they have so much viciousness towards other people that are, well, their fellow citizens, that they're like, ha ha ha, you're suffering. What are you doing? The two worst optical fails are Ted Cruz not canceling his Cancun trip. I don't blame him for doing that, but he should have known that it was a bad idea and that it would be exploited by his enemies. And then all the leftists that I see online laughing about it. Oh, haha, see, you don't take climate change seriously, and now you're without power. Ah, climate change. The climate change crowd is the most vicious because some of them genuinely believe doomsday is coming. By the way, none of the organizers and activists that actually run those groups actually believe that. Just so you know, they've been predicting doomsday over and over to get your money. That's why John Kerry now says 9 years to stop climate change when we were warned we were past the point of no return at CO2 levels we saw up to 5 or 6 years ago. So, keeping the grifters in mind, if they really believed in climate change, then their proposed solution wouldn't be a 20-year plan to introduce new taxes. It would be the destruction of all industry in the world in order to save the human race. You don't see that being posited by these people. Greta Thunberg would rather just sit in first class with her organic snacks. Yes, and by the way, there's a counterpart to the Texas story and all the hot takes that we're seeing, and that's the California blackouts. I seem to think those weren't blamed on deregulation or too many windmills or something like that. Okay, we had wildfires and shit, we're having brownouts, the grid is overstressed, and we've got problems. Well, the same's true in Texas. The grid's not designed to handle the kind of weather that you get in Vermont in February. It's just not capable of taking that stress. And so, you know, I think there are still millions of people without power at the moment. So Ted Cruz and AOC can go down there and have little competing little tents set up in Austin or Dallas or wherever, and hand out MREs and hand out water bottles to little kids and give them a hug and say how much they care about them and please vote for me when I'm up for re-election. That's about all. Peace out.